The Crypt interviews in association with Mayo Leisure Point Castle Bar.
You're listening to The Crypt, and joining me on the show today is Ari Lehman, who was the very first person to play Jason Voorhees in the Friday the 13th franchise. So you're very welcome to the show, Ari.
Well, thank you so much, Rita. That's right, I am the first Jason Voorhees from Friday the 13th, Ari Lehman.
And you were only young when you got that role. Can you tell us what age you were and how the part came about?
Oh gosh, I was 14 years old, and you know, it's very gratifying to me because this movie came out in 1980. It was made in 1979, and people are still watching it. But you got to imagine, you know, to be that age. We'll see. It was actually I was 12 years old when I went in to audition for Sean Cunningham the first time. Mm-hmm. I kind of snuck into an audition at the YMCA in Westport, Connecticut, where he had his office, and I just happened to live. Now that movie. The first one that I did with Sean was about soccer, as you call football, mm-hmm. and it was called Manny's Orphans, sometimes known as Kick. And well, you know, soccer wasn't very popular in 1978 in the United States, even though they had the New York Cosmos and everyone in that movie. So I had an 80-line role in that film. Now everyone was kind of disappointed when that movie didn't take off as an after-school special as Sean Cunningham had wanted. Mm-hmm. So seeing his situation, he kind of changed gears real quick. And looking around, he saw the success of Halloween, and he decided to create this title, Friday the 13th. When it came that they had to have a scene with a young boy in the lake, he basically just called me up and said, "Hey, Ari, we've got a new job for you. Can you swim?" And I said, "Well, sure, I can swim, Sean." And he said, "Great, you've got the part. Come on down." But he didn't tell me, of course, what was going on. I got to the office, and you know, they handed me another script. And well, at first they handed me the wrong script, and it said something to the effect of, "Well, the counselor goes off to make out with his girlfriend in the woods." And I was like, "Well, that's kind of strange." So Sean Cunningham walks in and he said, No, that's Kevin Bacon's script. This is your script." And I looked at it and there was no lines. And I immediately said, "Wait a second, what's going on here?" He said, "Ari, you're going to be the monster. You're going to be Jason." And that was kind of the first that I, of course, heard of it, or anybody had heard of it. This great character created by Victor Miller. Now, the thing that is a little bit unknown is that the scene that I was in, where I'm drowning, in other words, where famously Betsy Palmer, as Pamela Voorhees, is saying, his name was Jason. He wasn't a very good swimmer. Mm-hmm. And you see me just in a flashback, okay? That was going to be the only scene that I was to do in Friday the 13th, Rita. But, okay, they wrapped that in August of 1979. But then Sean saw the movie Carrie, and so did Tom Savini, and they decided to add this now infamous jump scare that's at the end of the film. Of course, we think it's all over, and Alice is in the boat after having decapitated my mother's head. You know, the beautiful music is playing, and this slimy child comes up out of the icy waters and drags her down under, which is now the famous scene. But that was not in the original script. That was written later.
And it must have been amazing working with the great Tom Savini. I believe he was a massive influence on you.
Well, certainly. It was, you know, you can imagine what it would be like to be 14 years old and see Tom Savini's studio, which was kind of like being in the laboratory of Merlin's, you know, inner sanctum. And, you know, because everywhere there was, you know, severed limbs and decapitated heads and carcasses and all sorts of weaponry, and all the tricks of the trade were right there. And of course, he always has in his studio the busts of Bela Lugosi and Lon Chaney and Vincent Price and all of them. So he's a big. He got me very inspired into the classics. And also, he made me want to grow a mustache.
And you still have it.
Yes.
And then you mentioned Kevin Bacon there. So many people don't realise that he's in the first Friday the 13th, and he had an awesome kill. Did you get to spend much time with him on the set?
Well, it's funny. There's a funny anecdote I have about that. And that, as a little kid, when they brought me back in, to kind of do this scene, I tried to get all into it, and so I separated myself. Savini said, don't let anyone see the mask. And, I was into this horror tradition. So I went to kind of psych myself into the role, just looking into the lake, this little kid. And so Kevin Bacon happened by, and he goes, "What you doing, Ari?" And I'm like, "I'm getting into character, man." And he just burst out laughing, and, he called the other, hey, this 12-year-old kid is getting into character. You got to see this. This is too much. And he made some joke about they were trying to get into the other characters, but, I don't know. It kind of went over my head at the time. But Kevin, of course, the famous kill scene that you mentioned is one of those great moments of horror cinema in which sometimes something which seems like an accident ends up being perfect. Like as in when my friend making a movie had them pull up this limousine to a cemetery and a bat flew right into the camera. I mean, perfect. Okay? But in this case, of course, Kevin Bacon is lying on the bunk, thinking he's had a lucky score and having a smoke and see, now we all know the arrowhead comes through the back of his neck.
Yeah.
Now, so Tom had this wonderful pump, and he was actually blowing the blood through the pump. Now, if you watch the scene, you'll see there's a time it bursts through and then it stops and then it bursts out again. Okay, that's because the blood actually went down through the tube and right into poor Tom's mouth.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so instead of choking it down, he blew it out. And then, waited until he said cut. And then he said, "Oh, we have to do it again. I ruined it."
Oh.
Sean Cunningham said, "No, that was perfect. That looked great." And they looked at it, and sure enough, and so there you go. That was Kevin and Tom. A lot of corn syrup has to be swallowed when you're making.
I can imagine.
Horror movies.
I can imagine. And out of all the movies, do you have a favourite Jason kill?
Oh gosh, well, I mean, there's so many cool ones. Of course, we always say sleeping bag. I mean, for me, even though I didn't kill anybody, I do love the final scene from Friday the 13th because it still has as much impact as far as a fear factor goes as any scene with as much blood as that pond holds water. I'm telling you that the impact, because it's got all the symbols of it's a new day, it's a new morning, the water, the sunlight on the water. The policeman even comes to say, like, it's all okay, everything's fine, and then blah!
Yeah.
Right when the violins swell up, the beautiful music by Harry Manfredini. I mean,
they always come back for one last scare.
I can kill her, so technically it's not a kill scene. But I do love, there's so many great ones. I guess if one was really to come to mind, it would be from Jason X, where he kind of freezes the victim's face in liquid nitrogen or something.
Yeah.
I thought Jason X was great. It's certainly a bit satirical, I think. It has a humorous thing to it, which I love. And it's one of the only times that Jason gets any contact with a female character whatsoever.
And then what do you feel separates Jason Voorhees from all the other horror icons?
Well, that's a great question. Jason is very, very different than any other horror monster, especially slasher, with perhaps the exception of Frankenstein's monster. Because Michael is insidious and menacing. And Freddy is a wise ass, and he's also talking a lot. Now Jason, he's not an evil scheming character. In other words, just like his mother, he feels that what he is doing is right, And that's why sometimes the audience roots for Jason like he's a hero, even though he's not. He's a terrible villain. He's righteous vengeance gone horribly awry. And that's different than almost any other character. You could say that happens to the Golem at the end of the film, and also to Frankenstein's monster after he realizes, who's a friend and who's not. But for Jason, it's always, once his mother is killed, I feel that something is touched off, which makes that overriding sense of his own sense of justice. Just as something that's inevitable. If you see Jason, you're going to die. He's the face of death, silent and brutal.
And this year's the 35th anniversary of the first Friday the 13th, and I believe you have got your own action figure now.
Oh, yes. Yes, I do. It was like my bar mitzvah. I couldn't believe it. It was an amazing thing. I said, I've really come of age. It only took them 35 years. Yes. Well, of course, it's interesting how, Hockey Mask Jason really captured everyone's imagination. But I really do think that there's something about the mom character, the mother, Pamela Voorhees, and the relationship between the mother and the son. That's just a wonderful kind of eternal mythological thing that hits people, both women and men and children. On a certain level that almost no other horror films do. And yes, thank you to Nika Toys for creating an action figure. We have yet to see what it actually looks like, but I'm very happy that they're doing it.
Excellent. And then, leaving Friday the 13th aside, your roots are in music, and you trained in classical music and jazz piano, and you now front the band First Jason, who punk metal band. So can you tell us about the band, please?
Yes, I do. That's. Thank you for mentioning that. Yes. All along, even when I was on the set of Friday the 13th, I was studying music, and I was very interested in jazz at that time, as you point out. And then I worked in world music and reggae music. Even went to West Africa, performing with some of the top reggae and African artists there. And mainly in New York is where I studied. Now, what happened was, once I became part of the horror convention circuit, my imagination started to go towards what would be something that would really appeal to this audience.
Yeah.
And, the open-heartedness and open-mindedness of the punk metal community is one thing that I really owe a debt of gratitude to, because they allowed me to take my time and kind of get my sound together. And I have to say right now, I'm very, very happy with the way First Jason sounds. I play a heavy metal guitar, one of which is on a giant machete with a LED Jason mask in the blade. But it's a power trio. It's myself, a bass player, and a drummer. We are on our third album. Our first album was called Jason is Watching. The second is called Heed My Warning. And, people can come and visit us at firstjason.com. We've performed at some notable events like Housecore Fest, which is Phil Anselmo's festival in Austin, Texas. Also the Whiskey A Go-Go, and the Viper Room, which is Johnny Depp's club in Los Angeles, and a number of big horror conventions. We've even performed in Europe, in Spain, and France, and Germany to some extent, and we're looking forward to coming back there soon, because we've just heard interest from a party in Europe about distributing our albums over there. And now we've got a new album coming out. This album, because we've been on the road so much, we just drove down to New Orleans from here, and we're about to go back down to Dallas and Houston. We're writing a book and an album that's going to be titled with a title based on a line from the first Friday the 13th. The title is First Jason American Original. I don't know if you remember wonderful Annie in the first scene when she calls Enos the truck driver. She says, "Oh, you're just an American original."
Oh,
she's kind of mocking him, and I always thought that line just stuck out. Like, here's this little sweetheart, and then all of a sudden she becomes real sardonic and is kind of, I don't know, subtly insulting, this salt of the earth guy who is giving her a ride to her new job, although he did kind of grope her a little bit.
And then looking at your profile on IMDb, you have some acting projects there in various stages of production. So can you tell us about some of those projects?
Yeah, no, it's true. It's well, I guess one of the more notable ones that would have immediate connection to what we're discussing is I was fortunate enough to be cast in Rock, Paper, Dead, which is Victor Miller's new movie project. And Victor Miller wrote the screenplay for Friday the 13th that, after 35 years, we're working together again. Although, of course, we've worked together many times at horror convention. And none other than Kane Hodder has been cast alongside myself.
Oh,
together.
Amazing.
Yeah, we're playing two orderlies in this asylum.
Oh, that's
and I can't tell you much more than that, but ironically, they titled... They probably did this to drive Kane crazy, but they titled me Tall Orderly, and they titled him Husky Orderly. Which makes no sense because I'm shorter than him. They just want him very well.
Oh, he's a great guy.
Dee Wallace is also in that movie, and I believe John Dugan and a lot of big names. And I'm very, very fortunate to be on that. I'm also in a few movies coming up. One's called Easter Sunday, in which I play the postman. Another one is called Silk Stream, in which I play a t-shirt mogul from New Orleans. And I'm about to be in another notable film called The Barn, where I will play video, rock DJ from the video, like from MTV back in the day, and I'm called Dr. Rock. And it's Dr. Rock's Rock Block. And that's in The Barn, which actually people can check out. It looks like it's going to be a great film. That's shooting in Pittsburgh. So, Rita, it's like, it's interesting. When I was in New Orleans, we performed in the French Quarter, and we went to play in a town in Louisiana, and then came back, called Lake Charles at Center Stage. And we came back to New Orleans, and I did a movie there. We're doing the same thing in Pittsburgh. We're playing in Toledo. Then the band's playing in Pittsburgh. Then the second night in Pittsburgh, they're shooting this Dr. Rock video for The Barn. So, this whole kind of dark arts movement, which you're a big part of, and, all the people who are doing radio shows and blogs and haunted house owners and ghost chasers and tattoo artists and people who collect hearses and independent filmmakers, it's all kind of coming together, and I'm very happy to be a part of it, and I think that, there are some really good offerings coming out now as time progresses, and people are getting better and better at filmmaking.
Well, that's it. There's so many fantastic, independent horror movies out there.
There sure are. It's amazing. Yeah. It's amazing. A lot of them from Europe, to tell you the truth. I've seen a lot of impressive offerings from Spain and from Italy, from UK as well. And I think that what's happening is those independent films are eventually going to be on the level of features, in the sense that they can be distributed by Netflix or Hulu or the like. And that really reaches everybody nowadays with this wonderful medium that we're actually speaking through right now. I'm in Chicago and you're in Ireland.
I know, it's fantastic. Thank God for social media, because you can make contact with so many of the stars of all the 80s and 90s horrors that we all grew up with and loved. So it's fantastic to have you all on the show. Well, then finally, before I let you go, where can people keep up with all things Ari Lehman online?
Oh, yeah. Please come to First Jason Official on Facebook, or just firstjason.com. Yes, we've got music. You can download our CDs for a small price at CD Baby. So jump in there. We've got a hot sauce. We do all kinds of things. But my real desire is to get the band over there to Ireland so we can show you how we do it here in Chicago.
Oh, and fantastic. That'd be great.
Down Crystal Lake style for you.
Well, Ari, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's been great fun chatting with you.
Thank you so much. And remember, Jason never dies.